Okay, this is Driftwood Residence, Volume 3, I think. Something like that. We'll walk through it one last time here. A couple of decisions to make just before we apply for the permit, and go through the plan first. There's not too much different than the stuff we looked at before. So the main things would be I've shown that wall gone around the stairs, so that's totally removed, and then we'll put in a railing there, so that's nice and wide open. The ductwork and the pipes that are currently in your dining room, so we've moved them over to the corner with the plumbing stack, and that actually works out really well. So I've moved this line of the window, the existing window, it's over that way just a smidge, because one, it's going to be hidden behind the line of this upper cabinet anyway, but then that also gives a room for the ductwork and the pipes and stuff to run up the ceiling. And then we actually don't need a bulkhead over that, over the sink or anything, because it should work out because your joists are running this way. Right, so then there's a space in between those, so really we just have to run those pipes and ductwork up into the ceiling. Should be able to run it through that joist space right over to where it is sort of existing over here, and that'll be over top of this new beam because the joists will be resting on the beam, so that actually works out perfectly. And then we can just throw another floor grill down there. We'll have to relocate one up to, what's going on, there we go, up to this area up here. We'll have one down there, keep that one, and that should do it. In terms of the kitchen cabinetry and stuff, I mean, the sink is definitely centered on these windows. We have a bit of a bump out in the wall up here, a little bit down here. I've shown it at 6 inches. I'm not sure. It might be a little bit less than that, but just to be sort of on the safe side. And then I've given 2'10" here, so it's actually 3'4" there, and this is 3 feet, and then this is 3'8". So I mean, it's still a pretty good size. You almost have 4 feet by 4 feet, so it's a pretty good size island with the L-shaped rest of the cabinetry. The fridge is sort of centered in this little walkway here, which is nice. And the AC, I think, really the only place that I could find to make sense, that would make sense, is down here. Because, I mean, we're not going to, I mean, it might just cover a tiny little bit of that window down below. This is the window on the main floor, so it obviously won't cover that, but I think there's room down there. And then it's tucked out of the way, and, you'll see that here shortly. We'll go through that. I think that's the major stuff for the plan. A couple other little things, like this wall, trimmed that back so that it's nice and wide open. You can kind of have like a waterfall edge on that cabinet down to the floor. And I think that's sort of it. Everything else is, it's not too much different than what we had before. The full width stairs on the back. But now we'll get into the exterior stuff. This is where, I mean, there's really no decisions to be made, I think, in terms of the plan. Like, this is pretty well ironed out. There's one thing that I will bring up here with this railing, how to deal with that. A couple ways to approach that. But then that's pretty much it, I think, for the plan. So get into the exterior stuff here, and I'm going to walk you through sort of the journey of where I got. I sent you a teaser there earlier and how I got to that. So keep in mind I'm going to go through about 15 pages here. I'll go through it fairly quickly, but we can sort of stop at any point here. So all these have page numbers on them. So if there's a place that you sort of want to, if there's one of these designs you want to go with, you can just say, it's on page 10 or whatever. And we don't have to go all the way to the end. So this is kind of a series, like an evolving series. So sort of starting with the basics, I mean, this covers all the stuff that we wanted to do. Second floor balcony. We have the little Juliet balcony in the third. Have a screen over on this side here to sort of block the neighbors. You have the full deck there, full width stairs. Tuck the AC in behind. And now one of the things I was struggling with was covering these stairs down into the basement. So this was my first shot. Like, this is the bare bones basics. How can we do that as simply as possible? And my first thought was, well, you could make like a little enclosure, almost a lattice work of like 2x4s or something. Then it's nice and open so that the air and the light can get through. It encloses it, and then you could just put on almost a piece of like clear plexiglass or something for the roof so that you can get light in there. Or you could do sort of a more traditional roof. And maybe that's getting a little too fancy right off the bat, right? But this was like as simple as I could get it. Like the things that we want to do, like this is sort of the bare bones. It does everything, but it's not fancy, right? You can see the AC sits pretty well down there. And the struggle with this is having that stair roof under the kitchen window. So this is one of the decisions we have to make at this point, is where we put this roof over the stair access. Because here you can see there's not a ton of space between that roof and the bottom of this window. And that it's a bit of an issue because where your roof is existing, it's actually too low. So if we're basically putting a new roof over that little enclosure, the building code states you need, I think it's 68 inches of head clearance, basically right over that stair. So yours is too low, so it actually has to come up a little bit. But then it obviously starts to encroach in that window. So the line of this window as it's shown right now is actually higher than where your windowsill is existing. We talked about that a little bit, like if we move that up, it gives a little more space for that roof. This, I don't love this. This is sort of a starting point to jump off. But you can see how, there would be light and air that would get into here. It's still protected from the rain, obviously. You have some kind of a roof, whether it's transparent or not a big deal. But then this isn't great, because if you have snow starting to build up here in the spring and then it melts, and then that snow can kind of work its way underneath like the flashing and stuff of the window. So I don't love that. Like, it would work, but it's not great. Like, we might even have to move the window up higher than it is. So then and then again, I thought, you know what, maybe that's trying to be too fancy with all these sort of slats and louvers and stuff. Maybe it just needs to be more open. You just have a basic railing, you do another railing over here, and then it's just super wide open, lots of light and lots of air. Again, it doesn't look like anything special. It's not super fancy. But two ways to sort of approach that covering of the basement stairs while staying underneath that kitchen window. Again, same thing, just comparing the two, how they look. This one on the right is certainly more open. Like if you're standing, on the deck, it's just, you get more breeze, you get more light. This is nice too. If you want to keep them more separate, it works. But then the issue, as I mentioned, so this is having the high windowsill. So this is what it would look like on the interior with the window as it was shown out here, right? So this location here is this location here. So you can see, your sink is here. It's not terrible. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with this. You have the cabinets on this side here. The island. There's still lots of light. This whole door is brand new. And this is nice and wide. But the difference is this is your existing windowsill. So, if you sort of go back and forth, if you can imagine standing at the sink, like this is obviously nicer, right? It changes the feel of the interior of the kitchen. You get way more light. You can actually, your kids won't be able to, I think the height of this sill was, I want to say it was 5'3". Don't quote me on that, but it was, the kids won't be able to look out that window for, years and years. So this is kind of, it's obviously nicer, and this is sort of the sticking point then. So if this is something that you want to shoot for, having this bigger window that goes down to the countertop, I was looking at ways, how can we do that? So then I thought, this is a little unorthodox, but you could have a stepped roof with 3 different levels, and you could, if you're going to do that, then you might as well do those louvers, because you have to have supports under it anyway. But I definitely don't like the way that looks. And if you're standing in the kitchen, even if you get that deeper window, you're still just looking at the back of this series of roofs, which is, I don't know, it doesn't work. It's not great. So, it would work, but it's not great. So then the other option I wanted to play with was putting the window over those stairs above the kitchen window, and still trying to maximize the light that'll go in there, because I know the sun's coming from that direction. So this was my first thought, is if you take that deck that's already up there and you just kind of extend it You know, you cantilever those floor joists out. Again, you could put a little piece of transparent plexiglass or even some tempered glass or something up there, so you'll still get light coming through. And then it still, I mean, it protects from rain, obviously, over the stairs, and then it feels totally different in here because it's super wide open, right? So that's kind of nice. I like how it's working. I don't love the way that it looks. I mean, this is kind of super disjointed because I mean, you have a railing here, you have a railing height here, you have another one up here, you know, they have the height of the screen, you have this thing sticking out. It's all sort of disjointed. None of it's really working together. It's doing what it needs to do, but it's not, I don't know, I'm not in love with it. And also I'm thinking, you know, looking at it now, you know, this area here, if you have 3 or 4 feet of snow on there, or whatever, it gets wet, I mean, you're probably going to have to put a post in there because it's not going to take that weight. So that was the next step. It's like, okay, if we want to have the roof above the window, so we can have, this still shows that higher windowsill. So, I mean, you can imagine it can come down kind of as low as you want now. And also as high as you want. Right now I just have those in line with the top of the door. I think that makes sense. It doesn't align with the top of this window, but that's not a big deal. But now you have this sort of transparent panel and you have this post and it's working, you know, it's starting to sort of make sense. But I mean, if you have a giant post here and you have a railing, you know, my next thought was, well, you could kind of just extend that railing. And then by doing that, you're almost creating this Z pattern, right? With this screen over here. So that's where I went next. Trying to sort of blur the line between what's function and what's aesthetic. And, you know, it's still doing everything it needs to do, but now it's all starting to work and put a little more harmony. So you have the screen up here that blocks the neighbors. And that can be, I mean, right here, this is shown pretty thick to sort of match the depth of these floor joists. You know, they'd probably 2x10s, could be 2x8, something like that. But then it's fairly substantial, will block the neighbor, but then it's seamless all the way down. So you get this nice sort of Z form. That's starting to, I'm starting to like that. This was an early version that I didn't really love, but then the more I started playing with it, I think this one's kind of works. So, and the nice thing about this is the major drawback, like the argument against this would be these louvers would be blocking some light, right? Because I mean, the sun's coming from that direction. But you can space those out enough that they're really not going to block much. And with the transparent panel above, I think this shows the next one here. Like if this was, I mean, a piece of tempered glass or just some clear plexi, something like that, that's going to just slope a little bit, shed the water off the end. It's not going to be super heavy, but then these louvers over here, they're doubling as support to hold that roof, but then they're also doubling as a railing so no one falls down into those stairs. But again, you can have them spaced nice and far apart so you still get lots of light coming through there. And that said as well, they don't have to be square. Like we could actually turn them 45 degrees or something so that really they're not blocking any light, which would be kind of cool too. So I don't know, maybe to do that, this might have to be sort of a frame. But then these interior louvers, you know, imagine them, you know, instead of being like this, maybe they're angled like this, right? So that that sun can still get through there, no problem. And they do offer a little bit of privacy too from that side, which is kind of nice. So then, I mean, I was definitely starting to pursue this idea. So then this adds a little more color to it, trying to make it look nice. And my thought was sort of playing up that Z form, you know, with natural wood, or, you know, it's just stained, something simple. But then you mentioned painting the back of the house, you know, a darker color, maybe like a charcoal or something like that. So then I thought, well, if you paint these posts black, or, you know, you clad them in black aluminum or something to match the eaves and the downspout, and you do the same with the railings down here and also the railings up here. I mean, they can either be wood, just painted black, or, I mean, these are shown pretty thin, only 1/2 inch in diameter, so that could be metal. I mean, that's maybe a little more expensive, but really not a crazy amount. And then when they're painted black, then they just kind of disappear into the house, which is really nice. And then you have, you know, the nice light colored stairs too, right? So then a nice sort of before and after shot at the back. This paints a nice picture, I think, of the difference that this will make to your house. And so now you can see, like, this is a nice spot for the air conditioner. It's sort of tucked away, and still, if you're coming out of that back alley, it's not really blocking much. You could still sneak through there, but you can still see over top of it too. It doesn't block the window above it. And then you get this really nice, strong sort of Z form out of those bits of natural wood, and then everything else kind of disappears when you paint it black. And I'm actually quite liking the way that that's working. And then, I mean, you can still get quite a bit of sun through there as well. And don't forget, I mean, you have this giant door plus this whole new window, so it's going to certainly be brighter than it is. Even if we do block a little bit of light over here, I don't think the trade-off's really going to be that bad. So then the interior, this is again showing the windowsill where it is now. So you have that nice tall window, lines up with that sliding door. You have that little bit of a bump out here supporting that the new beam above. Kitchen island. You have your cabinetry uppers that can run the whole length. This will be a little bit of a bump out, sort of similar to what you have now, just to hide the that ductwork in the plumbing. And I mean, the cabinetry can come right over to the wall and kind of hide that. So you just have that little patch right there. And then looking sort of from the dining room table, this is more or less what the interior looks like. Again, you have a little bump out on this side to support that beam overhead. No bulkhead because that stuff should be able to run right above the beam, which would be perfect. Your sink will be over here. You have your oven back there. If you want a dishwasher, you can tuck that into the island, and then you have your fridge kind of at the end of this little corridor. And then this little bar, whether that's counter height or full height cabinets, that just kind of flows right into the living room, no problem. So that's really nice. And then when we talked about pulling back this wall at the stair landing, if you leaned over the railing, this is kind of the view you're going to get. Or if you're coming in from that entryway and walking down the hall, like this is sort of the view that you get greeted with. And I mean, I think it's working pretty well for sure. This is pretty nice, aside from the blurry renderings here. But I like the way that's looking for sure. But that did lead me to one other thought, was this railing. I mean, this is just kind of a traditional railing. Like if you're looking the other way now from the kitchen, this is what it would look like with that chunk cut out. Because I mean, right now that wall goes all the way up there, right? So if you cut that out, you put in a railing, you get way more light from the back of the house going into that hallway, which will actually make the hallway a lot nicer too. But the thing that I thought of here was, if you liked those louvers, the idea of the louvers on the back, you could do something similar in here. And again, maybe this is getting a little too fancy. I don't know if I love this idea actually, but I thought I'd just throw it in just in case. Because you could do something instead of the traditional railing, you could run louvers right there, full height, floor to ceiling, which still lets the light in. You still get all the light through, but it divides the spaces and it sort of matches the backyard. Because you will be able to see, this and the stuff outside at the same time. Like they'll be definitely visually connected, those two things. But I don't know, maybe that's a bit much, because I mean, I still kind of like this too. And you could do a railing, like if those railings on the back were black, you could do the exact same railing here. You know what I mean? So that matches the back railing, and that's not a big deal. That's more of an aesthetic thing. So a lot of the stuff is kind of more aesthetic based decisions. But the one thing that we'll need for this permit set for the application is what you think of the roof over the stairs, whether we do it below the window or above the window. So that's kind of the main thing that we'll need to just decide on to get the permit application in. And then the rest is pretty minor stuff, like the actual railing material. This could be glass or something too. It really doesn't matter. As long as it's the right height, I can just say material to be decided. And they don't really care. Like that's more of a design decision than like a safety thing or something like that. So I think that covered pretty much the stuff that I wanted to talk about. So anyway, if this is something that you like, just let me know, and we can, like I said, anything before that, like if you liked anything along the line, like if you wanted the single post or something instead of the louvers so you get more light, I mean, no big deal. We can do the same thing, paint that black. It'll kind of disappear. This one on this image here, I forgot to put that screen on there, but you get the idea. If there's somewhere, or maybe, maybe you do like these earlier ones with, the simpler or something like that, we can do any of those. Really just need to know where the final roof height's going to be. And so that kind of comes down to your kitchen window and how you feel about that. If you want the sort of narrower, shallower one, or if you want the one that's with the sill height where yours is currently now. So, yeah, I think that pretty well covers it. Just gonna go back to that final page, see if there was anything else that crossed my mind here. Bear with me. There we go. I mean, yeah, I like the way this is looking for sure. You can throw a barbecue out here, a couple chairs. Yeah, this, I mean, you can just do a really simple sloped roof that's translucent, so you still get tons of light through there. These louvers can be, a foot apart, something like that. If they're, especially nice if they match the spacing of these joists under here. It all flows together really nicely. And then, actually, one other thing to think about was this screen here. So I've been showing it pretty heavy, but we could just, you could just wrap around that railing and just put on like a thin little trellis or something like that. So that's probably the other thing that I should show, whether that's just kind of a normal railing and then you put a screen up after the fact, or whether you want to go with something a little more heavy duty and like this. And then I would just definitely put that in the drawings earlier, just so that, it doesn't come as a surprise when the inspector comes to see it. And even then, that's probably fine. But that's, I would say, the height of the roof over the stairs and the screen, whether you want it to be a railing with a screen or, a heavy screen kind of thing. So those would be the two decisions to make in the next day or two here. And then I'll make the adjustments to the permit drawings and get them in ASAP. I think that's it. I will end this and I'll get it posted now. See ya.